Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you visiting me for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I am a mixed media artist from Pennsylvania. So today I am working with one of my it's an 8-inch by 8-inch cradled wooden board. I get these off of Amazon if you're interested in um, getting some of those for yourself. I have a link in my description along with all of my other commonly used items. So that I decided to not gesso. I am going directly in with some Grumbacher red paint and I am painting everything, the top and the sides there, just to get a nice red base going. If you were with me for last week's video, I started out with a raw wooden base as well. I ended up doing some collage and then topping it with an ink drawing. And I'm going to do something similar today, although the outcome is going to be entirely different. So for my collage, I wanted to make just some very plain collage paper. And that right there is titanium buff. And I am going to be using that as well as titanium white and also some Payne's gray just to make these sheets. Now you might notice I'm using my gel plate there and my roller just to get some very uneven roller marks on there. And that's what I'm going for. I'm going to print up those other colors and then I'm going to tear them up and adhere them right to the top of that board that I just painted red. I'll be doing that with some of my matte gel medium. That's my preferred method of adhering my collage to my pieces. You could use gloss gel as well. The only difference is it will have a glossy finish versus a matte finish, obviously. I like to go with the matte gel because I like to decide at the end whether or not I want to add a gloss finish to it. So once I have those all printed up, I'm kind of just taking them and setting them around, deciding what I want to do there, tearing off some edges. I decide that I want to make the edges not so perfect. So these were just cut sheets of tissue paper that I'm using there, and this is just regular old tissue, gift wrap tissue, not wet strength or anything. And you might notice there that I sprayed some water on that, and I do that just to get that kind of frayed edge look to it. Now, you don't need to do that. There are a lot of other ways to get that as well. You can just, tear it by hand, which is typically what I normally do, but I was being a little bit impatient and wanted to get it done quicker, so I just went in with the paper wet and pulled off kind of some just rough edges there. Like you can see that tissue paper dries very quickly. I went in with my titanium white sheet and did the same thing there, just making those nice and grungy looking around the edges. So when I adhere them down, you're going to be able to see a little bit of the tissue paper. A lot of it will just blend in. But since I don't have anything else on the background there and it is just the solid red, you will be able to notice the edges of the tissue paper there. That's why I was paying a little bit more attention to the way that they looked. Normally, if I was going on top of other collage or other printing or painting or whatever, it does just blend in almost entirely. But because I don't have that, I just wanted to make sure that it was a little more natural looking and not quite so sharp of an edge. And once I've got all of those printed up and dried off, which like I said, that only took a few minutes because the tissue dries really quickly, I went ahead and got my matte medium out there. That's what that is in that little jar. And I'm placing the pieces around to decide how I might want to display them. And I know that I want some dark color in the background, but I want some light on top of it, and that's really all I have to go on right now. I'm going to just get started on that part and see what needs to happen next. I am an intuitive artist, and all that means is I will start a piece without having too much of a controlled idea in mind. I might have, a color or an image or some kind of basis, and I just start working and I react to what's going on the substrate, and that informs my next decision. Sometimes I don't even have that much of an idea and I just go in completely blind and grab something and start. Those are fun pieces to do too. It's a really good exercise to really jumpstart your creativity. So I got my first sheet down there and I'm just using an old gift card to smooth some of that medium off. Laid a coat of the medium down first, laid down the collage piece, and then put more on top. That's just to make sure I have a really good strong bond and nothing is going to come off there. And I'm trimming as I go and tearing a little bit, which further emphasizes those jagged edges, laying down some more medium and continuing along with my collage process. Because I use tissue paper, you can see some of the underneath colors coming through, and that's why I wanted to have those really uneven brayer marks on there where it's not like a solid square of color, it's uneven, and you'll see some spots are solid white, some spots you can see some of the black and red coming through it. Now you might wonder why I didn't just take the brayer and go directly on the wooden board. And that is a choice that I could have made, but I wanted to have some control over what was going on, and if something went down off of the brayer that I wasn't pleased with, I could have painted over it, but this way that wasn't going to happen because I know exactly what it's going to look like. And also, being able to see some of that tissue around the edge gives it another layer, another tone, and just a little more visual interest that I wouldn't have had by putting the paint directly on the board. And now I'm just going back and forth and trying to find some balance between the colors and tones. I've got some lighter pieces and I've got that titanium buff sheet there that I know I want to use, not exactly sure how, but I do decide to use some of those lighter Payne's Gray pieces and then lay the titanium buff over the top. The reason why I want that lighter color in the middle is because that's where I'm going to put my ink drawing, and I'm going to be using some Bombay ink in black. And so I wanted to have enough of a lighter background there that the ink was definitely going to show up on in a way that made it look purposeful. It's interesting because when I start making these pieces, since I don't go in with too much of an idea while I'm working, I tend to get ideas from my own work. You'll have to let me know if any of those of you that work intuitively like that. Does that happen with you too? Because as I'm making this piece, I start thinking about doing a really large scale piece kind of in the same style using these brayered collage sheets, and I think that would look really cool. We'll have to get into that sometime. So I had to let this dry for a little bit because otherwise the pencil was going to start eating holes in the collage papers there, which it did a little bit, so I had to come back after a while. But I'm just rough sketching in an image of a bird. Now this is not meant to be anything hyper realistic. It's going to be very stylized and very kind of whimsical looking, and that's exactly what I wanted to have for this particular piece. I wanted to hit it with the pencil first just so that I could have a little bit better of an idea when I go in with the ink, because I didn't want to destroy everything by making one, false move with the ink and, kind of just messing up the whole thing there. So I decided after that I might want a little bit of text on there. So I got some titanium white on my gel plate and my brayer and just rolled it over a text stamp that I have. It took me a couple tries with that side for some reason because I just kept not putting enough paint on there, but I wanted a little more interest to the background without putting a bunch of busy shapes on there, because then I decided that what I did want was some shapes and pattern inside the shape of the bird. Now, had I thought of that before, I could have actually just collaged this, or I'm sorry, I could have printed this design on some other paper, tissue, or otherwise, really anything would have worked, and then cut the shape of the bird out of that. And I kind of wish I had done that, but since I didn't, I just got some painter's tape and outlined him just so I wouldn't get the pattern on the parts that I didn't really want, and just kind of going in there a little bit with an eraser to try to get some of those pencil marks off, and putting a little more scratch paper around there just so I don't mess up my background in a way that I don't want. And I have this stamp block here, and I'm going in with some of the Payne's Gray because that's a color I used in the background, so that'll be nice to pull that forward in the design there to the front a bit. And I'm just simply stamping that on there and just going over until I'm happy with the saturation of the design. And this reminds me a little bit of some bird collage pieces that I did early on in my YouTube early days. I'll put a link to those videos at the end for you in case you're interested. I'll put a link to last week's up there too if you want to check that out. But I'm just going through and peeling off all of that tape there. I did heat it up a little bit there with my hairdryer. That's a good trick if you have trouble, if your painter's tape is sticking to your paper, even if you're using watercolor paper or anything, if you just heat it up a little bit with your hairdryer, that'll loosen the adhesive on there and it'll peel right up. Decided I wanted to put some of that same design into the tail area there too, so I blocked a little bit of that off with some more scratch paper, got some fresh paint there on my plate, and went to it. I like this design a lot on that little stamp, and I think it worked really well for a design on the bird there. And I'm not going to waste that paint there on the gel plate, so I set a piece of tissue on there to pick it up for the next time. So here I've got out the Bombay ink, and I am using just a bamboo skewer because I like the way those transfer the ink. I am not looking for anything precise. I want it to be sketchy and kind of rough looking, and I've found that this is my favorite tool for achieving that. So I'm just putting my bird on there. He is facing backwards, as you can see his little beak there on his back feathers. And just going in and doing some rough shading around the face there. And I'll give him some legs and feet, and he will be complete. The ink can definitely build up on the tip of this skewer, so you might notice that I am like dabbing it off on a piece of scratch paper there. I just don't want giant blobs going anywhere that I don't intend for them to go. So for me, that is the best way to kind of get rid of those and mitigate that problem before it actually happens there. So once I got the bird finished, I wasn't really sure where I wanted to go or if I wanted to do anything else. It looked like it was a little unbalanced because I have the weight of the visual weight of the bird on the bottom right hand corner there in the dark ink. So I felt that it needed to have some sort of addition up there at the top on the left just to kind of balance everything out and bring it together a little bit better. So I ended up actually using that sheet that we just printed that I said I was not going to waste the paint that was on the plate. And I'm tearing some of that up and just adding 3 little lines of that. And you will notice here too that in the meantime, I went through and edged that with some black paint. So I just used painter's tape to paint off the lines on the side and painted that with some of my black matte paint there that I finish all of my pieces with. And that's when I decided that it needed just the visual weight of something dark up there, and I thought that this would work nicely since I had just printed that sheet there with the excess paint. And this is what we ended up with. Once I got this finished, I let it dry and I sprayed it down with some of the Krylon triple thick acrylic glaze. And I'm going to show you here in a moment what we ended up with. And here's the finished piece. I'm pleased with how it turned out. I didn't really know what it was going to look like. I just knew I wanted to use ink and collage, and sometimes that's all you need to start a piece. So I hope you enjoyed the process and maybe got some inspiration to make something of your own. And I always enjoy hearing about your pieces that you tell me about in the comments. Feel free to do so. And if you like what you saw today, give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I look forward to bringing you another piece of art next week. Have a great day.